Hey all, and welcome to episode 1 of SchezzWho. I'm Conrad SchezzRunner. For a while, I've been representing the Beach Brothers show, specializing in business and politics in Virginia. I wanted to branch out and stretch my legs with the show vehicle streamlined just for me. I'm 36. I'm a former Virginia Beach City Council candidate, member of the 757 Battle Cats, aka the Community Action Team, representing Portsmouth and Virginia Beach. I'm married to the sensational Andrea Dixon, and not only I thank her for germinating this idea of this new show and channel and creating its infrastructure, but I thank her for being the wonderful center of my life. I also want to thank SchezzWho Varner, who helped bring me into doing live streaming with the Beach Brothers show and generating the idea of starting the community action team. With SchezzWho Varner and his ideas, I know a lot of good things are around the corner. Can't forget shouting out Charlie Roy Chesvenner over at Southern Volkswagen Greenbrier Southern. He can surely hook you up with a great used car. So dial 757 719 1746 and get the ball rolling on that front. So tonight on SchezzWho's first episode, I feel like talking national politics. So I reached out and I'm fortunate to get on the show Chase Oliver. Chase Oliver is a 37-year-old libertarian activist living in Atlanta. Check this out. Rolling Stone dubbed him the most influential libertarian in America, and that's pretty cool. Oliver is a champion of rights of the individual against the growing power of the state, and this can be measured back to when Chase began his political activism by opposing the war in Iraq under then President George W. Bush. He then discovered the Libertarian Party when checking out a booth at the Atlanta Pride Festival in 2010. In 2020, he ran for Congress in Georgia's 5th District to complete the term of the late civil rights icon John Lewis. In 2022, he ran for U.S. Senate, debating incumbent Senator Raphael Warnock and Republican challenger Herschel Walker's empty podium. Oliver was widely credited with causing the runoff election between Warnock and Walker, becoming a national name in the process when Chase won over 2% of the vote in an extremely tight race. Oliver advocates for the adoption of ranked choice voting to avoid future runoffs. Riding the success of his Senate campaign, Oliver announced his Presidential Exploratory Committee in December 22, and since then he has been traveling across the country to connect the voters and other libertarians. So thank you tremendously, Mr. Chase Oliver, as I bring you on right now, for coming on tonight. I hope you're doing quite well.
I am. It's been a busy day as usual, but I'm doing great. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Now, I'm going to start off by saying I'm a big NASCAR fan, so I'm going to admit first I'll be in Atlanta this November to take some hot laps around the resurfaced Atlanta Motor Speedway. And in that vein, I dare say you're probably the second most prominent Chase in Georgia after Chase Elliott.
Yeah, well, I guess I'll take that. And I do love, I'm an old school NASCAR fan. So I'm back in the days of Dale Earnhardt Sr. and Bill Elliott, rather. Darrell Waltrip was my dad's favorite driver when we were growing up. So I've been to Atlanta Motor Speedway quite a few times. It's always loud. It's always fun. And the repaving sounds like it's something that's fun to do. So we look forward to having you in Georgia. So come on down and get some of that Southern hospitality.
Oh, I can't wait because I've seen the last couple of races in Atlanta, and the racing looks a lot more like Daytona and Talladega is. And that's just something I can't wait to do myself. It'll be my first time in Georgia as an adult. I just can't wait to experience that. So my follow-up question would be about another state. In your presidential run so far, have you stopped by Virginia?
Yeah, I did actually. I was in Manassas, Virginia not too long ago. I did a quick couple of meet and greets through there. On my way to also meet up with some media in DC. So I was kind of in the area there, Northern Virginia. I have a lot of friends in the area, including my exploratory campaign manager he's from Virginia. So I love the region, and yeah, it's beautiful up there.
I hope you stop by a couple more times and all up and down the East Coast. I know you've been through Iowa. So this is going to be just a great trek that I hope you get to see all of the country while you do this. So I want to roll in a little bit more of a biography for you. I did that little intro, and I want to know if you could touch more on where you hail from and your education and career path along the way.
Yeah. So first, I want to say I have traveled all over. I've been to 26 states so far. I'm trying to hit all 50. So I hope I can get there before our national convention. But I reside here in Atlanta, Georgia. I've lived here since about 2009, but I've lived in the metro Atlanta area since I was 7 years old. Born in Nashville, Tennessee, but like I said, I lived in Georgia nearly my entire life. And really, my career path has been one of service. Like I started out, really, my first main job was I did carpentry and stuff like that for a little while. But then I spent 13 years in the restaurant industry. I started out as a dishwasher in a restaurant, and by the time I left, I was actually a general manager and consultant for new restaurants that were open industry. So, kind of moved through every level of that extremely, extremely difficult industry, and one that requires you to be focused on the service of your customer, because if you're not doing that in the restaurant industry, you don't last very long. So it's something that kind of dedicated me to making sure that as I do my job, I'm always in service to other people. And I transitioned out of that industry into the maritime shipping industry, where I spent 5 years basically helping customers move products for, all over the world, particularly importing into the United States via the southeastern ports. And a lot of the work that I did with maritime shipping involved handling U.S. customs issues. So it is a job that really teaches you how much smaller and more interconnected the world is than you think, and how what happens on one side of the world can affect trade on the other side of the world. So I feel like it's a job that really prepared me for politics in that way. And then most recently, I did some HR work, and I worked as an HR professional, hiring and firing people, which the first part's always great. The second part's never fun. And then right now I'm doing, kind of freelance gig economy work just to pay some bills while I'm campaigning full time. So not getting rich what I'm doing, but it's maintaining where I'm at. And then it allows me to pretty much be on the road as much as possible, campaigning full time regularly. So that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, it just would have been easier, of course, if we could all be billionaires when we run for president. But I'm glad to see that you're able to not only do this, do it seriously, but do it in such a way that you could also still work. So it's great to hear. It sounds
Yeah, I
normal.
mean, the work is really minimal. It's pretty much all campaigning these days. It's just a few hours a week of just making a little extra to put some food on the table. But really, my main work right now is campaigning full time, and
I want to follow up on that campaigning full time because you're only a year or so older than me. You've run for the U.S. House, you've run for the U.S. Senate, now you're running for the presidency. So, where does the ambition for federal office come from?
Yeah, so my original race was for Congress, like you said, and the reason for running in that race is we had a special election here in Georgia. John Lewis had passed away, and so we had a special election to fill the remainder of his term. And because it is a special election, we did not have the onerous signature requirements that's usually required for the Libertarian Party of Georgia. So we needed to put a candidate up. It was a unique opportunity for our party to actually be on the ballot for U.S. House the second time ever. And so I lived in the area. I was somebody who was already kind of active in some of the activist movements down here. So I decided to throw my hat in the ring, and it was a quick sprint of a race. It was like 10 weeks. So, and I thought that'll be it. I'm done. But then in 2022, we had an open Senate race. We needed to have a Senate nominee rather. And I decided, after talking with some members of the party, they thought I could be a great representative to go up against Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker, somebody who presents a fiscally really responsible vision that is not going to be, all the culture war battles that Herschel Walker was fighting, but also somebody who can speak to a lot of the issues that Raphael Warnock and maybe some national Democrats have avoided, things like real criminal justice reform, immigration reform. So I took it upon myself to run for the nomination. I did, and it was an honor to be able to represent the Libertarian Party in that race. And now, because I caused the runoff and got all this national attention, folks actually came to me first saying, have you ever thought about running for the White House, becoming a presidential candidate? And I didn't really anticipate doing that. But I prayed on it, and I thought long and hard, and I consulted with family and friends. And they said, man, this is the time. Strike while the iron is hot. The voters are looking for something different. And you're 38 years old. Well, I'm about to be 30. I'll be 38 next week. And then, you're 37. You're going to be able to compete really good against these old guys who are running for the White House, or the Republicans or Democrats. You're maybe the messenger the party needs right now. And after exploring it for a while, I became an announced candidate. Now I've been running full steam. And as I said, I've been touring all over the country. I'm getting great response from libertarians and even non-libertarians who are hearing the message and are liking what they hear.
Excellent. Excellent. Now, you touch on a little bit of the differences between the Democrat and the Republican in that previous race of yours. If you could, just break down your understanding of the greater differences between Republicans, Democrats, progressives like myself, conservatives, libertarians, and of course, why you chose your beliefs.
Yeah, so I think if we look at the national Republican and Democratic parties, you're going to see, basically, I liken it to pro wrestling. Like that's the analogy I like to use is that there are two foes in the ring pretending to fight each other. They're putting on a choreographed performance. And the reason why they're doing that is because it gets emotions up, it gets fundraising up, it gets the outrage up, and it allows them to continue to be the center of attention, the focus of attention, not the fact that they have rigged the system to prevent other groups from jumping in. This is why we have such a duopoly system, is because the system is rigged for Republicans and Democrats, and they're the ones doing the rigging. And so the differences I see between them are just nominal policy differences that are really around the edges. They both want to grow the size of government. They want to have government be intrusive in your life. It just depends on what policy area they're looking for. Now, that's where the difference comes in. Really, both of them serve a giant military industrial complex that for the last 23 years has been at war all over the world. And so I don't see very much distinction with those parties other than the fact that they are maintaining a stranglehold on authority. Now, as far as differences between libertarians and progressives, right, I think there's a lot of areas of agreement with what the problems are. Like we feel like there's problems with justice or immigration or with the way people are able to grow and prosper, maybe start a business, have prosperity. We agree on a lot of the problems. There's a lot of solutions that we have really differences on, but a lot of areas we actually can form single issue coalitions, and I think are very important. I think criminal justice is the biggest one. Here in Atlanta, we're fighting to stop Cop City at the referendum level. And, I'll be out in the street gathering signatures. Who am I gathering signatures alongside? Progressives on the left who are sick and tired of seeing the Atlanta city government kowtow to a militaristic police, right? So, I think while there are big differences maybe in the philosophy and in the backgrounds of the solutions, there's a lot of problems we can agree on. And I hope that progressives are welcoming that discord. Right? I certainly welcome it. And I think it's actually good for us disagreements on stuff and be able to come together, honestly and with respect, and be able to hammer those differences out. And ultimately, I think things will move forward that way. But why am I a libertarian? Because ultimately, I do believe that government should have really no role in my life so long as I'm behaving peacefully and not harming other people. And it is really there's, sticking to those principles of smaller government, smaller invasion of privacy, keeping government in check. I fear a large, overly intrusive, overly abusive government. And my problem with progressivism is many times they give government more power than they currently have today with the intention of they'll be using it for altruistic and good purposes. And I find that to be the excuse every time that we expand government power. We're doing it for the good of the people. And just so many times that turns out not to be the case. I think we need to get back to a more liberal, libertarian system of governance.
Thank you for that. I also want to thank you for being able to come on, address me, a progressive, in a respectful way. And I want to return the favor back to you. Just like you said, we should be back and forth in a way that's productive. My next two questions are going to be more about how I sort of seen the Libertarian Party over the past year and a half and some things that seem borderline controversial about them. Before I do, though, you did mention Cop City. I want you to delve just a little bit more into that because that might actually be something that we're close to having an agreement on.
Yeah, so Stop Cop City is a movement of activists and organizers who are opposed to the building of a giant police training facility in the Walani Forest of Atlanta. It's one of the 4 large green space forests in Atlanta that allows us to be the greenest canopy city in the entire country in terms of large cities. So they want to clear cut this area to build this large police training facility. First, they originally lied to us saying it was only going to cost the taxpayers $31 million. It's actually costing us $67 million. But worse than this is it is really continuing the policy of the police to continue militarizing and not respecting the wishes of the people who live in the area. We had 20 hours total of public comment at the Atlanta City Council, and 4 people, as far as I know, spoke in favor, and hundreds spoke against. And it is the kowtowing of the city government to the Atlanta Police Foundation, which is a private organization that's made up of, say, the large corporate donors in the area, the Home Depots, the Deltas, the Coca-Colas of the world, and what have you. And they really push this because they say it's for public safety. But what's going to happen is you're going to clear cut this forest. It's going to create a huge floodplain that's going to damage the property owners in the area, most of whom are minorities who don't want this facility in here, including having a shooting range. It's within earshot of an elementary school. And so it's just bad planning all around. I would say, hey, there's a need for police, but you can retrofit the facilities they already have that they've allowed to fall into disrepair for a much lower expense than what we're doing with clear cutting forests. It's also the added controversy, the fact that a protester in the forest was murdered by police, 57 entry and exit wounds, and we still don't have justice for Tortuga. And so that is their name. They are a non-binary protester. Their nickname means little turtle. And they were an environmentalist who was protesting against the destruction of the forest, who sadly lost their lives. And we want to make sure that as libertarians, we speak up against militarized police. We want to speak up for justice reform. We advocate for things like ending qualified immunity, holding liability insurance for officers. So when they do wrong, it comes out of their insurance policy, not out of the city budget when they settle, and also has the added benefit of making uninsurable officers unhirable. So there are these common sense steps that we can take together as libertarians and progressives to advocate for, particularly the local level with our police, to make police more just and safer for all communities, that increase community trust between people and the police as well. So it actually makes their job actually safer too. They just, it's this Blue Lives Matter, back the blue mentality that has prevented this kind of stuff from moving forward. And we want to make sure that we're speaking to that and fighting against it. So I urge you to join with other progressives. We're moving to stop Cop City. Right now, there's a referendum movement to cancel the contract via voter referendum this November. We're looking to gather those signatures right now to get it on the ballot. And we look to be on track to actually get it on the ballot. So once it's on the ballot, the people will be able to cancel the contract, and Stop Cop City will become a past movement, because we'll have stopped it, and we'll need to move on to stopping other things and holding police accountable elsewhere.
That's some good stuff. I love to hear it, and I would definitely join you in a similar circumstance if I was living in Atlanta. This is work I would like to also do more here in Tidewater, Virginia. So I'm glad to see that you were doing it there, and it's definitely a topic I'm concerned with, and then you're treating it seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to go in next to the Libertarian Party itself. And I would say the past year and a half, there's been a reckoning. There's been splits, power struggles, new leadership. To some, perhaps myself, an unfortunate, toxic alt-right tinge may have seemed to have sprung from it. This is even exemplified here in Hampton Roads and in the state of Virginia. The local party had many drop out due to issues like this. There's a side organization called the Tidewater Libertarian Party, even though they're effectively more of another Tea Party. And that organization was lambasted by the state Tidewater Party of the State Libertarian Party of Virginia for using Tidewater Libertarian Party in the name. And then the state party itself sort of dissolved due to the national party changes with the Mises Caucus ascension. So you want to be the nation's most prominent libertarian leader. So what's your vision of a party you'd like to see more well-respected?
So don't really want to speak too much to specifics in Virginia, because I try not to attention to internal party stuff if it's not in my state of Georgia, though I've had to pay attention, of course, to what's going on nationally. I wish we had a party that was more unified. I feel like infighting just doesn't work well for a third party because ultimately you're firing your guns inward. That just creates a smaller and smaller echo chamber. As a candidate, my job is actually to look outward and to try to grow us from the bottom up. And it's what I really seek to do. And it's what I hope that the party can support in the future, as opposed to infighting. Fighting's been going on for a lot more than a year and a half. It's just the last year and a half is when we had the leadership transition over from one side to the other. But there's really been infighting for quite a while. And I think it's detrimental to growth. I think, honestly, if you are here to organize around electing people to office whose focus is on libertarian principles, namely reducing the size, scope, and abuses of government to each and every individual, broadly speaking, I want you in our party. I want you in our movement. I want you in our movement, even if you're not a hardcore libertarian yet, because I think once you get in the tent, you start hearing more about our philosophy and our principles, and they make you grow within the party. And I think right now, we've applied kind of purity testing sometimes, where it's like, oh, you're not a real libertarian. That we hear that all the time online, things like that. I just think that's reductive and not worth growing. I think if you look to successful political movements in the past, they're ones that grow from the grassroots, that allow for discourse and free exchange of ideas, and ultimately you come out more principled, and iron sharpens iron. I don't like, hey, we have to take the party back from A, B, and Z. Ultimately, I would like to see a party that's representative of the broad spectrum of libertarianism, from the person who's basically just a constitutionalist who just wants to get back to those constitutional principles, all the way to somebody who is an anarchist, right? I'm not an anarchist, but we have them certainly in the movement. So I would like to see that broad spectrum really represented by the national body, and not just like one wing or one other group or one caucus doing everything. Because I think even if that occurs, right, I think there's a whole group of people who feel like they're being listened to, they're going to sit on the sidelines, they're going to take their ball and go home, and just isn't conducive to growth, whether it's one ideological wing or the other. So I think the quicker we learn to work together, the quicker we're going to start being back in growth mode. And my hope is if you're upset with the National Libertarian Party organization, and you feel you want to organize elsewhere, fine, organize elsewhere. I have a presidential campaign. There's 50 states that we're going to be running in. So if you feel like you're not feeling represented, come here. As long as you want to work hard and be a positive force for liberty, I want you on my team. So I hope to diffuse a lot of this infighting as our candidate, because I don't find it worthy of growth. I don't find it really something that's going to be cost effective, really. Like, it doesn't work in the long run. It's not worth the investment, so to speak. So I hope we can move past it, really.
All right. I'd like to take just a quick second to sort of go over another important sponsorship, hopefully, of the SchezzWho show, and that's the flying folding chair of justice. If things are getting dicey and that ball cap is in the air, it isn't cap to reach for the flying folding chair of justice. Get you one. Remember, it's your Second Amendment right to do so.
I can open carry. I have several chairs in my closet back there. I might bring them out by the end of the show. I do have to say, I do love that America has come together around the Montgomery fight, as just there's been so many creative TikToks and social media created out of that. So yeah, arm yourselves. I believe you should be able to arm yourself with whatever you want. I'm a big Second Amendment guy. So yeah, be it a revolver or a folding chair, whatever gets the job done.
Yeah, I actually made that point online once. Technically, if you wanted to treat it as an arm, then it's very broad, saying you have the right to arm yourself. It could be that fan I have right here, or something would be an arm, but it's a little too digression. But yeah, it was really funny, but also important to see that community handle the way they did.
What is it? They tried that in a small town. They FAFO.
Yeah. Let's hear about that, Jason Aldean. So let's just see what happens next time if you go through Montgomery Way. I want to bring it back a bit to Libertarian Party, some more recent events through the prism of myself, a progressive. Here in the 757, I'm on the community action team, which is focused on political accountability, on improvement of the Black community. Ideologically, of course, I'm the progressive here, and I view a more active and deliberate government as a great way to achieve empowerment of the Black community. Now, one of my favorite contemporary politicians, Nina Turner, a nationally prominent progressive Black woman, was an unfortunate victim of viciousness from many in what might seem the 2023 Libertarian Party. And here's how it happened. She tweeted a stance that insulin and other medicine should be free. The New Hampshire Libertarian Party tagged her comment and responded to it by publicly saying Nina Turner picking crops should be free. Now, Nina didn't take kindly to that racial disrespect, and she called it out. Then the National Party defended the New Hampshire rhetoric, tagging Nina's response and publicly equalizing the advocacy for free at point of service medicine, something I would want to advocate for, with that of slavery. Apparently, this is what might seem the brand of libertarianism, and maybe that's not fair, but this is deliberate, suspect commentary from them, and I find it to be equivalent of an own goal in soccer. You're a presidential candidate for the party, and you didn't say it, so you're not going to get blamed at all for this, but I really want you to see if candidates for such a high office with this party can know when something is messed up and sort of own up to it in a way. This is a brand, it's an image issue, and you have to know many voters who have distinct issues with the Republican Party and the Democrat Party, they are looking for something better. They may have
Hmm.
seen this, and they immediately wrote the Libertarian Party off. So, what might be your opinion on that?
Yeah. So, as you said, it's about brand recognition, right? And I think as a presidential candidate, you're running to be the chief brand officer for the party, nationally speaking, across 50 states. First, I want to say I reject that messaging. I think it's terrible messaging. It is a dog whistle of the worst kind, and I just don't respect it. I think it does not help the party, does not help our message, does not help our movement. Certainly didn't have anybody talking about insulin, right? And that was the thing. Well, it got people talking. Well, if I light my hair on fire and run down the street talking about insulin, guess what they're not going to mention? They're not going to mention that I was talking about insulin. They're going to mention that I was running around with my hair on fire. So this kind of reactionary, we must shock jock kind of people into messaging, I don't think it works. It just doesn't. And ask any major marketing expert, and they will tell you that when you're a smaller brand, as the Libertarian Party is in the body politic, that does not help you gain market share. It does not help you grow. You can't take risks like that when you're a smaller brand, right? And that's what we are. We're a growing brand. That's what we want to be. So I absolutely reject that messaging. I think it's horrible. And it's nothing that I would have ever said to Nina Turner. Now, we can talk about insulin. And I did when I debated Senator Raphael Warnock in a respectful way, talking about there are ways to reduce the cost of insulin that does not require us just to shift the expensive cost that exists right now onto taxpayers, namely ending patent evergreening so we can get more generics on the marketplace. That allows for more marketplace competition, right? If we could get a generic insulin on the marketplace, Mark Cuban would have it on his cost plus drug website right now for the cost of manufacturing plus 15%, which right now saves a lot of people a lot of money. We can do away with bans on importing insulin and competing products from Europe and Canada that are just as safe, just as effective, but because they haven't gone through the red tape of the FDA, are not currently allowed to be used, right? We saw the same crisis when it came to the importation of formula during the COVID, when we had major supply chain issues during COVID. We should have done away with those just to allow for the importation of baby formula so people weren't having to, worry about if their kid's going to be able to eat. We can do the same thing with medication. It lowers the cost. Again, it creates a marketplace initiative to lower the cost through competition. So there's lots of ways we can talk about lowering the cost of insulin for consumers without being reductive and just going to attacking people's messaging through. I'm from here in Georgia. If you tell a black folk to go pick crops, that's fighting for it. Like that is extremely disrespectful. And so I would say, while I completely disrespect while I completely disagree rather with Nina Turner's position on insulin and saying that it should just be and really her position on healthcare being a single payer system, I can do so in a way that is respectful and that's what's required for my position to be able to grow within the marketplace of politics. Otherwise, you're right. People just see that kind of stuff and they write it off. And I hope that has not happened to a point where we're not be able to be as effective as we can in the 2024 cycle, whether it's myself or someone else ends up winning our nomination at convention. We need to be supporting our candidates. This kind of messaging does not do that. And I want to make sure if I'm our nominee, the messaging that's coming out of my campaign is one that's positive, aspirational, and that's going to be able to be supportive of our candidates all over the country at every level of the ballot. And so let's just say nobody who put that messaging out there will be on my messaging team for my campaign. Because they've basically failed the most basic job interview ever, which is avoid extremely controversial and damaging rhetoric, which is should be rule number one. So I reject it, and I think anybody should really look towards rejecting that messaging. In fact, I've seen national party officers rejecting the messaging out of New Hampshire, which is the people who initially caused us, even if the person who has the keys to the national Twitter account decided not to. So I think there's definitely dissension within the party about this. And I think the majority of people are just completely outraged by that kind of messaging and want to see better messaging out of the party because they want to see the party grow. They want to see the movement for liberty grow. And they want to see us advocating for our principles instead of having to excuse what I just spent the last few minutes having to excuse and cast aside. I wish we could have spent that time talking about other things, but we do have to talk about it because it's been put out there. And so, I hope that's satisfactory. We can move beyond this terrible messaging. But thank you for giving me the chance to have to reject it.
Yes, sir. And I reach for my drink to say I drink to all that. I appreciate the aspect of being respectful in messaging because that's what you're going to need especially in a national election when you want as many votes as possible.
Yeah, I
You don't
mean, we
want
have
to
a
chase any of
large
them away.
yeah, we got a large number of undecided voters who are just really dissatisfied with the two-party system. We want to make sure that we're making the tent to come in welcoming and inviting, and that just doesn't achieve that goal. In addition to just being, really rude and terrible to say, just
Yeah.
doesn't achieve the goal that they say they want, right? Which is to have the party grow. I think there's a better path to take, and I'm taking it.
I do want to reach out to some other interesting things, and I wanted to aim this in a way that I think you would appreciate that because I've heard you're a big fan of Star Trek. And I'd like to ask some political questions with Star Trek in mind. So you want to give it a go?
Absolutely. Let's talk about Star Trek. I'm a huge fan. I have all my Star Trek crap over here. So
Let's look at the concept of UAPs. There's a growing seriousness of unidentified aerial phenomenon. So, is there utility to President Chase Oliver advocating for our Space Force to be something that we might see in Starfleet?
hey, let me just say this. If I'm elected president and there's evidence of extraterrestrial life, I will be the first to tell everybody because I love the idea of us being able to not only communicate with each other, but I love the idea of if there are people out there that for us to be peaceful and to try to communicate with them, right? I know some folks, but hey, if that's the case, let's go ahead and do that. But I would hope that our Space Force is not really a force, but more of an, like they say in Star Trek, the Federation they're about Starfleet's all about exploring. And that's what I hope we do is explore our universe. I don't want to conquer our universe. I don't want to fight in our universe. I want to explore our universe. And I think there's real practical application there. Though, maybe not for quite a while. I don't think we're ever be traveling faster than light speed in my lifetime, but we can hope and dream for that stuff. But really, I love the idea of us unifying around peace and moving ourselves and our message of humanity outward and it being a peaceful one. So if I were president and we find out there's something out there and we make first contact, previous to Bozeman, Montana, and, previous to Zephram Cochrane as the lore of Star Trek is, I hope that we can present a peaceful message and a unifying message.
Speaking of unifying and speaking of first contact, that's only about 40 years away. April of 2063 was when that first contact happened. And if something like that were to occur, should President Chase Oliver have a central role in helping create a unified Earth government?
I don't know. I've never really thought about like if aliens come, like do we start the United Federation, the one Earth government? Really, what I think we can do is regardless of government. So I'm a libertarian. I want government to be small and as minimal in our lives as possible. But what I think we can do is we can continue to forge market relationships and trade with one another. And the more we trade with each other, the smaller our world and the more interconnected we become. And it's more about market relationships as opposed to government relationships. And that's the way I see forward in the future. Like that's the way that I see that we're going to grow ourselves in prosperity all over the world by developing markets and market relationships. I want to see those developing markets be the next people to put stuff on a container ship and bring it to the United States for us to trade with. Because ultimately, I think that's what leads to more world peace. If we're trading with one another, we're not bombing one another, is usually how it goes. And so I think that's really the way to one world interconnectedness is through free market and free trade relationships as opposed to doing that at the government level. I think we do that in the individual level with the trillions of marketplace decisions that happen every day. And I would facilitate a world that allows for more of that to occur with less interference from governments. And so I hope as we break those barriers down, we become more of a one unified people.
Do you think that you would imagine this being so reliant on marketplace of not only commerce but ideas? Would we lead into a Ferengi type of government there, where it's a little too acquisition based?
Well, the Ferengi are a little bit exploitive, right? First half of their population is completely the entire female half with. And they're not allowed to trade. They're not allowed to own property. They're not even allowed to own, wear clothes, right? In that show. So I would hope we would not digress into that model. And I think really, if you look to the creation of Star Trek, like the whole purpose of Ferengi is to like describe like what happens with the worst excesses when you actually stop worrying about the individual and you really worry about the conglomerate or corporate level of things. And I think, we're in danger of doing that, right, in our own economy. I would hopefully, if I'm president, I want to break down all kinds of barriers for people to create the next small business that gets to compete with the medium business. I want the medium businesses to compete with the big businesses. And really, right now, we have a government that's bought and paid for from the large corporate centers on top. And that's another reason why I want to break down government power and influence, is because it ultimately breaks down the power and influence of these large corporate firms to have control over the regulation that keeps small firms from growing. So, I think the Ferengi are like the worst excesses of cronyism, which is not real free market capitalism, but really it's actually something that stifles market growth. So it's something I seek to reject if I were president. I would remove pretty much any subsidy that exists, say, for energy, and let the energy market compete instead of just giving billions of dollars to oil and natural gas to artificially compete. I think that the marketplace can make better decisions than myself, right?
Right.
So yeah, avoid the Ferengi cronyism and go for a more market-based system, right?
There we go. On a more, how you currently see your field, I'm going to bring up a question that just happened on YouTube here, and that is from Andrea Dixon. If you are elected, would you add any current candidates as your VP or in your cabinet? Now, there is a nominating convention when it comes to the Libertarians, so I think they would also nominate the vice president too. But in this case, could you say who you might want?
Yeah, I mean, I can say, there's really a couple of folks that I see pretty regularly as I travel, throughout the country who are also competing for a nomination. That would be my friend Mike Dermott and Lars Mapstead. Both are really nice guys. They have great stories and a lot of background that I find very valuable. So I could certainly see them having a role, in an Oliver administration. And as far as VP, really what I'm looking for is somebody who's going to be able to complement the message that we're putting forward. Somebody who would be very positive and aspirational, who wants to really try to invest in the next generation of libertarians and Gen Z. And of course, I would look for somebody who has really, maybe some great experience, something that I might, somebody who's a little older than myself, right? That provides that elder statesman role, right? So I could certainly see myself supporting some of the other candidates being involved in the process. And if the delegates selected, like I said, either Mike or Lars as my VP, I think we would be able to work together. So, there's some other candidates who are also in the field. I welcome their support as well if we win this nomination, and we'll see what roles people can have. But really, it's those who are the most active that I'm most attracted to in terms of my fellow candidates, because I see them putting in the work and the time. And they've been running for just as long or longer than I have. So those two for sure would definitely have a role, certainly if I'm the nominee at our convention, and really help me decide on a policy level some people I could place in roles if I were elected. But yeah, I want a VP candidate that's ready to get to work and ready to help invest in the next generation of liberty. Let's do that Star Trek, the next generation. We want libertarians, the next generation. And I'll be looking for a VP candidate that the delegates give me to help me do that. I hope they give me a great running mate, but ultimately it's their decision. They could nominate anybody they want.
From the standpoint of several years back, do you think it is they tried to be a little regal in 2016 by having former governors be the ones who ran, or maybe that was wise in that moment where both candidates were kind of really hated, so you wanted a serious version? I don't know what the ultimate goal was, but Gary Johnson and Bill Weld did bring a level of seriousness to it.
Yeah, I think if, in that election, that was actually what they were really bringing to the table, was like an air of legitimacy because they had been elected to office. They had actually been the chief executives of a state. Ultimately, I don't think the ticket performed as well as they could have. There were a few missteps along the way. I think we could have taken advantage of that moment in 2016, certainly a little bit better. And certainly with the prestige they brought, I thought we could have performed a little bit better. That's nothing against Governor Johnson as well. He was my first libertarian candidate for president that I got to vote for in 2012. I highly respect the work he's done. And he even took, after he became a presidential candidate, took the time to run for U.S. Senate out in New Mexico. So I really respect the work he's done for the party. I think he's earned his, his elder statesman status, but I think it's time for a new brand of leadership and a new direction. And it doesn't involve being a former Republican governor. It involves being somebody who can speak our principles in a way that's attractive to new voters who want to see something new, who are sick and tired of the same old, same old. And that's what we're seeing right now, is like 60% of voters say they are dissatisfied with the likely choices out of the two parties. And so we need to be putting a message that's energetic, dynamic, and ultimately something that contrasts with the powers that be. And I don't think running former governors is the way to do that this time around. We need to have somebody who's going to be more of an activist voice, which is exactly the kind of guy I am. Get out in the streets, be heard, be loud, be visible, but ultimately be principled and positive.
Yeah, if I was trying to think back to three quick critiques I might make to their campaigning in 2016, I think it was the Aleppo question. The time Gary went on some sort of interview that made him seem childish, and when Bill was being interviewed on MSNBC, he gave a little bit, seemingly too much credence to Hillary Clinton in that instance, and made it seem like the air was let out of the campaign in that instance, right when it needed it the most, going into election day.
Yeah, I certainly think those are three areas where there are definitely missteps. I think the Aleppo question was a little bit overblown considering how many times Donald Trump had gaffed in 2016. I don't think if you had asked him what Aleppo was off the top of his head, he would have known either. But that's the thing. We get one Aleppo. Donald Trump gets 100 gaffes. Joe Biden was a gaffe machine all through his senatorial life and his vice president, and yet
worse
got elected
now.
President, right? So the bar or the standard for mistakes is much lower for us third party guys, because we get one screw up and then that's all anybody ever talks about. Meanwhile, like I said, Donald Trump and Joe Biden can barely complete sentences half the time and nobody bats an eye.
Yeah, it's just sort of baked into the equation. I'm glad you were able to mention Mike Termott, because I hadn't heard of him prior to today. I had sent out a couple of links of this show to other libertarian friends of mine. I'm like, hey, check this out. And Mr. Tim Lewis said, if you're interested in talking to Mike Termott, let me know. And I'm like, cool. Perhaps we'll see what happens down the line, but I'll have to research more about him down as well. Is there anything that you might think of, and this is a question I'm thinking of in the moment, that you might be able to be welcome to the idea of a non-libertarian to be on your ticket, if that makes sense? Not that you had that much control because of the convention, but like if there was an alliance with the Green Party or something like that, is that too far-fetched because they're ideologically too different? That they could team up to be against the two-party duopoly?
Here's the thing. I have a hard time seeing libertarian delegates nominating a non-libertarian to be the running mate. But if they were, that's who my running mate is chosen by, right? Is by the libertarian body. What I will say is I think we do need to organize together across the parties that are independent of Republicans and Democrats to make real changes. And we can do that around ideas like ranked choice voting at the local level. I think Greens, independents, libertarians, forward party folks need to all organize around that, because once we break down that barrier and ballot access barriers, it really opens it up to competition. And then we are really able to really start cooking with gas, so to speak, and really start making real changes at the organizational level and at the voter level. So I hope we can organize around things, whether they're on my ticket or not, around some of these big ideas. And particularly with the Greens, if they have ballot access to be able to theoretically get the electoral votes to win, they should be on the debate stage just like the libertarians. I hope they join me in fighting for debate access. And if they're not included and we're not included, I hope whomever the Green nominee is, Cornel West looks to be like their leading candidate right now. I hope Cornel West joins me to protest, and let's get arrested trying to get in the debates, because we want to make a statement. We want to get into that good trouble that John Lewis used to talk about. And I think that's one way to do that. Is to be, visible in our outrage of the fact that the American people don't get to hear from these alternative parties in the debate process. And so, while I don't think the libertarian delegates are likely to give me a Green or a somebody outside of the party as the nominee, if they were, we're going to figure out ways to work together to break down the two-party system. But I welcome whomever the delegates give me, but I don't think it's going to be a Green. Sorry, I don't want to burst bubbles or anything, but I do say we would welcome somebody who is maybe new to the party, who wants to come on in and be a libertarian, who has a name out there. I would welcome their support. We welcome anybody to come in the Libertarian Party. And that includes, hey, if you're a Green and the Libertarian or the Green's not on your ballot in your state, come on and support the Libertarian. Vote against the two-party system. Make your vote an outrage vote if you have to, particularly if they're not letting your candidate on the ballot. Make it be known.
All right, now I got a couple more policy related questions similar to the Star Trek vein, and a couple might bring in Dr. Cornell West and the Green Party in the topic. So let's go with in Star Trek, humanity developed a weather modification system. I'm fascinated by that concept, and with our rapidly changing climate, I think big things should be done. So, should President Chase Oliver, hopefully with international cooperation, lead an effort to proactively engineer Earth's climate and stabilize the planet?
Well, I don't know if the technology is quite there to do that, but I know one thing we can do is try to fight back against climate change at the innovation level. Like, I want to, again, I would remove subsidies for all kinds of energy, and that includes carbon based energy, and allow those technologies to compete in the marketplace. I would look to reduce the red tape and regulation around nuclear power. I really think that's the key to really fighting back against climate change at the energy production level is through nuclear power because it is clean, it is carbon free, it produces relatively little waste that we can securely store. And technology for nuclear power is, people think like Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island, but really the technology has progressed like leaps and bounds ahead of that to where we're having much smaller reactors who can produce much more power. And so that's really where I think the key is. Do I think we're going to be able to modify the weather? No, I don't. And I really don't think that technology is going to exist in my lifetime in any real meaningful way. But what we can do is we can fight back against global climate change by, again, unleashing the ability for innovation to thrive and to stop subsidizing dirty energy and allow energy to compete in an open marketplace. I think the consumers want energy. I think consumers want cleaner cars. They want cleaner ways to live. And firms will provide this because that's what the consumer wants. What we have to do is let government get out of the way of allowing these new markets to grow and really get out of the way of holding back the energy marketplace by subsidizing so much coal and natural gas and oil. Just get that out of the way and let the world compete. And I do believe nuclear power is the future. So no, I don't think we're going to be modifying weather, but I do think we can really push back on the amount of carbon we're putting in the air and fight back against the changes we're seeing in the climate. I do want to say, we're seeing fires in Maui right now. Speaking of, climatary and, ecological disasters, like over 38 people, I think the last was what I saw, 38 people had lost their lives. So my heart's out to those folks. And I want to say, there are ways we can address the environment that don't involve, top-down government, giant regulations and mandates, but instead allow human innovation to flourish.
Now, Star Trek also has a model society and measures of diversity and equity. So, to achieve it, of course, policy was enacted alongside massive technological innovation to allow both efficient and equitable energy, shelter, food, and healthcare. So, is libertarianism necessarily opposed to doing that? And I'll outright compare it to advocacy on similar issues that a prominent third party, like we mentioned with Dr. Cornell West and the Green Party, might advocate for.
Yeah. So first, you got to look at the environment of Star Trek, right? It's a post-scarcity economy. It's an economy where we have food processors, replicators that can just make food appear out of nowhere. And so what gets us to that level is questionable. But actually, in the canon of the show, it's actually capitalism. It's the desire for wealth that has Zefram Cochrane develop the warp drive. He doesn't even like to fly. He says he wants to do this so he can retire on an island with beautiful women. So it's his desire for profit that actually ends up creating the first contact in the Star Trek universe that builds the entire post-scarcity economy of the Federation. So I do remind my friends that it's actually profit motive that made that happen, according to the canon itself. Now, do I see that being something we can do in the future? Yeah, like I wish technology could get to where we could create just industrial replicators and food replicators and all this stuff. But I would remind people that there's still definitely inequality that exists in the Star Trek universe. I mean, just look at the show Picard and look at the differences between Jean-Luc Picard, who lives on a giant, wine vineyard with, many acres apparently, and then you look at the character of Raffi, who's in like the space trailer and on Chavez Rocks, right? So I believe that's the name of the place. It's like a really famous filming location for Star Trek. And so that inequality does still exist. Like there's still markets. It's kind of murky how they explain that stuff a lot of times. I could get into a whole long tangent about the kind of contradictions that exist within the Star Trek marketplace. And in fact, I have, when I go to comic conventions, I've been part of nerdy economics panels that involve different people describing how things are supposedly working in the 23rd, 24th, 25th century. So, yeah, I will remind my friends, my progressive and socialist friends, Zephyr Cochrane was a capitalist. The whole reason we have warp drive, all of it was because of capitalism. So Star Trek is capitalism, kids.
There we go. There we go. Now, we know there are multiple issues with someone like yourself and Dr. Cornel West being third party candidates, like the stigma of vote stealing, or how our electoral college sort of creates that first past the post election system, which only has inflamed the stranglehold of the two party system. So, just what's the proper way to do a presidential election?
Well, first, I would say this. If someone tells you you should change your vote because you're going to be a spoiler, uh, two things. One, they are discounting your voice. They're saying your voice is not as important as joining the group's voice. I reject that outright. Your vote is your voice. You should be able to vote for whoever you want without any kind of guilt that you're spoiling an election for someone else. Secondly, you're not a spoiler. You're a participant. You're only participating in the system that a two-party system is created for you. They could solve this very easily by passing ranked choice voting or approval voting or any other kind of advanced voting beyond the plurality system that currently exists. But they don't do that. That is not the fault of third parties and independents. We would certainly do this if we had the ability to do it. And so your outrage, your ire should be with the two-party system. And that's who you should be rejecting right now. Whether it's the Libertarian Party, which is, I hope, where you put your vote, or it's a Green or some other independent voice, the most important thing is that you're rejecting the two-party system, because they don't respect your voice. If they did, they would give you a better way to vote that's more representative to your views and your values. But they instead like to consolidate power amongst the two of them and compete in, like I said, this political pro wrestling match to keep you outraged, to keep you excited, to keep you spending money, and to keep you stuck in this process where your views are not really being represented. The giant corporate donors' views are being represented. That's who really runs the Republican and Democratic Party. And so my advice to anybody who's thinking about voting outside of the two-party system is to do it, to organize. And remember, we do have states that do have better systems. We have Maine and Alaska. I would really encourage the voters in Maine and Alaska to make someone outside of the two-party system their first choice on their ranked choice ballot, to send a message that you want something different. And so I'm going to be spending a lot of time in those two states encouraging that. But I'm also going to be working with activists on the ground level and at the grassroots level who are trying to pass ranked choice over the country and encourage those movements to pass. Because if it doesn't happen in 2024, we can have it happen in 2028 or 2032. Third parties and independents will break out if we give them the means to do that. And it requires us to organize and hold the two-party system accountable. Do not accept the excuse that you have to vote for me, otherwise the worst people win, because that's how we continue to get worse and worse candidates. When I debated Senator Raphael Warnock, the question was, how do you stop runoffs? I gave the actual answer, which is you pass ranked choice voting. It lowers the cost of the process. It simplifies the process into a one-day thing, so we're not waiting weeks to know who our next elected official is, and it saves us time and money and effort. His answer was, if you don't want to run off, just vote for me. And that's been the standard answer of the two-party system for a long time. If you don't want the other guy to win, just vote for me. I don't have to offer you anything. I just have to tell you why they're terrible. I'm sick and tired of that kind of stuff. I want to offer something aspirational for the voters, and I know I can do that. And if I'm our nominee, I will be on the choice of everyone's ballot in 2024. And I hope I can communicate that message out in a way that resonates and grows the movement against the two-party system and really holds our elected officials accountable and holds their corporate donors and overlords accountable too.
Well, we're going to get ready to close that out, Mr. Oliver. And this is the first SchezzWho episode. And SchezzWho is a play on the popular saying, says who. So let's give you this opportunity to formalize your selling pitch. And I'm hearing from a few friends of mine that you should be president. SchezzWho.
Well, here's the thing. I'm somebody who wants to fight for the individual rights of each and every person. I believe that if you're not harming anybody, you should be able to live your life in a way that you see fit. You should live as your authentic self in peace. And I will do everything I can if I'm elected president to facilitate that at the federal level by reducing the government's role in your life. I want to make sure that you are able to start your own small business. I want to make sure that you are in control of your body and its autonomy. I want to make sure that you can have as much choice in your life as possible. And so to that end, I am fighting to be the libertarian nominee for president. I want to reduce the size of government. I want to reduce the military empire around the world. I want to reduce the impact that government puts in your life. And I want to take the boot off of our necks and allow people to live, trade, and work together in peace. If you want to go to my website, it's votechaseoliver.com. Please join us. We are a growing movement, and we are also going to be the first libertarian campaign to ever speak at the Iowa State Fair, which is a huge political event. It's the first time a third-party presidential candidate's had the opportunity to speak on stage, and I'm going to take advantage of this unique opportunity to speak out against a broken two-party system. Join the movement. Go to votechaseoliver.com.
Thanks for your time tonight, Mr. Chase Oliver. I had fun. I know I want to keep this show rolling along into the future, so we'd love to have you come on again. And I'm sort of thinking of maybe even being on an online debate moderator with progressive questions for the 2024 Libertarian National Convention with all the presidential candidates. But that's for another day, though. So, Mr. Chase Oliver, thanks again. I hope you have a fantastic night and a great weekend to come.
Live long and prosper, my friend.
You've watched the first episode of SchezzWho. Thank you for that. Like this video on your way out. Subscribe to this channel. Share it around if you could. Come back for the next show. And I hope that you take care. Catch you next time.